Hello, my name is Shafiq, and today me and my partner are going to explain the tort of negligence, specifically medical negligence. And we are going to do that by solving the issue that is provided to us by our wonderful and amazing lecturer, Miss Marini. The issue that was given to us is whether Domio can take action against Doctors Richard and Newton for the injuries that he has sustained due to the surgeries that were performed by them. And he's doing this under the tort of negligence. So what is negligence? Negligence is defined by Lord Allison as, in the case of Blythe against Birmingham Waterworks, as doing something that a reasonable person would not do, or omitting yourself from doing something that a reasonable person would do. So negligence, there are three elements for negligence that must be fulfilled for it to be established. The first one is that the defendant must owe a duty of care to the plaintiff. The second is that that duty of care must be breached. The third is that the plaintiff's injury must have been caused by the defendant. Now, let's look at the first element of negligence. The first is that the person that is defending from the claim must actually owe a duty of care to the person that is claiming. Now, this element actually originates from the case of Donahue and Stevenson. However, for medical negligence, the element works a little differently in the sense that they don't use the same test that a normal sort of negligence would. And this is because the doctors are a very specific body of professionals and they don't conform to the rules of negligence, to the normal rules of negligence. But thanks to the case of Pippin against Shepherd, it establishes that doctor and patient relationships already have a duty of care, the element of duty of care. Hence, applying that into Domio's situation, since he is suing the doctors that are performing surgery on them, the element of duty of care is already established. Now, for the second element, is that the person that owes a duty of care has actually breached that duty of care. And how we determine this in medical negligence is through two tests. The first one is through the Bolam test, and the second one is the Montgomery test. So the Bolam test originates from the Bolam against the Foreign Hospital Management Committee case, and in that case, Mr. Bolam, who was depressed, had agreed to go through the electroconvulsive therapy for treatment, and during treatment he had fractured his pelvis, and he blamed the doctor for this because he claims the doctor could have restrained him or gave him relaxing drugs. Now, the Bolam test created by MedNeg goes like this: would a competent group of medical professionals do the same thing as the doctor would if they were in that position? If the answer is yes, then there's no negligence. If the answer is no, then there is a breach of duty. Now, Bolam tests are actually applied in cases of examination and diagnosis. For example, the case of Maynard against the West Midlands Regional Health Authority. Now, in that case, the patient has Hodgkin's disease, which is actually fatal if not treated early. And the doctors actually operated without the results of the tests that they had made, and there was a risk of damaging the patient's vocal cords, and the risk became reality, and the patient sued. Now, after application of the Bolam test, the court held that the defendant was not liable. Now, the reason why you use the Bolam test rather than the objective test is because the Bolam test, because Lord McNair said that the man on the Clapham omnibus cannot be relied on as he does not possess the same qualifications as a doctor, hence it would be unfair for a reasonable man to be expected to do so, to have those sort of qualifications. And now going into the Montgomery test, which originates from the 2015 Montgomery against Lanarkshire Health Board case. Before going into detail on that, the Montgomery test is actually used for cases of consent or disclosure of risk, and originally those sort of cases would be handled through the Bolam test. So, for example, the case of sit-away against my apologies. For example, cases of sit-away against the Bethlehem Royal and Malkley Hospital. Now, in that case, the patient was not told of the 1% risk of spinal injury due to the treatment that he was given. But the risk became reality and the plaintiff sued. However, due to the application of the Bolam test, the defendant was not liable. However, there was a dissenting view by Tort's government who said that the doctor has a duty to inform the patient of the risk before going through with the treatment. And in the case of Bolito against the City and Hackney Health Authority, proves that the court are becoming reluctant to fully utilize the Bolam test. So the Bolam test in that case, the House of Lords in that case reaffirmed that it was actually the courts who decide if the defendant is liable or not the medical board. And in that case, the defendant was actually held liable. Now, going to the 2015 case of Montgomery against the Lanarkshire Health Board. In that case, the patient was a diabetic mother who was about to give birth, and she was not told of the risk that arises due to her condition by her obstetrician, and those risks again became reality, but she was not privy to that information. Hence, she claims that if she would have opted for a different route, or she would have consulted with her family first, which would have delayed the operation, creating a different scenario. And the court agreed with her and held that she was entitled to know. Now, the Montgomery test is applied in the sense that, the Montgomery test goes like this. Based on the information given by the doctor, would a reasonable patient make the same informed choice? Now, this shifts the responsibility from a reasonable doctor to a reasonable patient, and the Montgomery test is now the official way to determine whether the cases of disclosure of risk, defendants in those types of cases are liable or not. Now, putting all those two tests aside, it must be said that medicine is continuously evolving. Therefore, it should not be expected to doctors should not be expected to have every single information about the risk of the procedures. Putting the two tests aside, it cannot be said that because medicine is continuously evolving, it cannot be expected of doctors to know every single risk of every single procedure, as they themselves might not know of the risk at the time. And this is actually evident in the case of Roe against Minister of Health, where the patient suffered from paralysis after the surgery, and years later it was proven that the paralysis could have been caused by a cracked container that contained the anesthetic that was given to the plaintiff, which was contaminated, and the plaintiff took action. However, the court held that the defendant was not liable because they were privy to that information at the time. Now, applying all of this into Domino's situation, first we'll look into the examination and diagnosis part, where Dr. Richard did the same thing as the doctor in the Maynard case, where they had operated before the results of the scan or test became available. And the only difference is that the patient in the Maynard case was actually required the surgery, because if there was no early treatment, he would be dead. And this is not the case for Domino, as Domino it did not mention where Domio would be, where the disease is fatal if there was no early treatment. And if we were to apply the Bolam test, we would get a different outcome than the one in the main test, where the defendant was held not to be liable. But if we were to ask a competent group of medical professionals, then they would disagree with the doctor and say that they would have given, they would have waited for the test. And now going into the part of disclosure of risk and consent. Now for that, Dr. Richard is also liable because he did not disclose the risk of the 5% of getting the pulmonary embolism if the surgery went through. And again, by referencing to the Montgomery case, much like the patient there, Domio deserved and was entitled to know, as he could have opted for a different treatment or consulted with his family and in the end decided not to do it. So again, it would have provided a different outcome, and it proves that Dr. Richard has breached the duty that was given to him. Now for Dr. Newton, we are going to reference the case of Rowe against Minister of Health will be referenced, as he was not privy to the information, much like the doctor in the Rowe case, of the surgery limiting the mobility of the legs. And because of that, he is not held liable. He is not held to have breached his duty. Now for the final element of causation, causation is divided into causation in fact and causation in law. Causation in fact is to determine whether the injuries of the plaintiff were actually caused by the defendant or not. And we use the Butler test to establish this from the case of Tort against River McLean that was made by Lord Denning. Now the test is, if not for the actions of the defendant, would the plaintiff have still suffered the same injury? If the answer is yes, then there's no causation, since this plaintiff still would have suffered the same fate. And we see the case of Barnett against Chelsea and Barnett against Chelsea and Kensington Hospital Management Committee, where 3 night watchmen had started vomiting after drinking tea, and the doctor refused to treat them. And the next day, one of them died because of arsenic poisoning. So the court held the Butler test the court applied the Butler test and held that the defendant was not liable, as the plaintiff still would have suffered the same injury, as the patient still would have suffered the same death. Now looking at the cases of consent, which is Chester against Afsha. Now in that case, by applying the Butler test, Afsha would have Chester suffered the same paralysis if not for the actions of Afsha. And Chester claims that he would have taken his time to decide, and because of that, it would have led to a later operation and affecting the balance of probabilities, which would have led to a different scenario. And the House of Lords agreed, said that it satisfied the test, and the claimant needed a remedy. Now that we've established causation in fact, looking into causation in law, which is essentially the remoteness of the damage. And we do this by applying the forcibility test that comes from the case of wagon mount. Now in that case, the defendant's vessel, which is the wagon mount, had leaked furnace oil, and there was cotton debris that was boiled in it, and sparks from nearby welding combined with the oil had created a fire that destroyed the wharf and several ships. Now the foreseeability test is to see whether the damage was foreseeable or not. And applying all of this into Domio's situation, the first is the examination and diagnosis, where it is by referring to the Barnett case, the Dr. Richard would have Domio suffered the same fate if Dr. Richard had waited for the test. And the answer is no, because then Dr. Richard would have had more information to give better advice, possibly given a better treatment that would have reduced the risk. And Domio also would have consulted with his family and friends, and would have opted not to do the surgery, possibly. Hence, the outcome is different from Barnett's case, where the defendant should be liable. And the next case that we refer to is the case of Chester against Afsha. In that case, it is similar, as if not for the actions of Dr. Richard, Domio also suffered the pulmonary embolism, much like Chester did with paralysis. And again, he also would have consulted with his friends, and it would have led to a different outcome, much like just said. So the next one is the foreseeability. Now that the causation is established, foreseeability, by applying the foreseeability test, it can be said by referencing to the Liyana case, it is foreseeable as there was a 5% risk of the pulmonary embolism occurring from this surgery. Hence, because of that possibility, the doctor it made the injury made the injury foreseeable for the plaintiff. Hence, now that all elements have been fulfilled, to conclude, Dr. Richard is liable for the actions of Dr. Richard is liable for the actions of for his actions against Domio, and Domio can take action against Dr. Richard for the injuries that he has sustained due to the surgery that was performed by him. The first element was established through the patient-doctor relationship. The second element, the breach, was established as by applying the test, the Bolam and Montgomery test. And the third one is by applying the foreseeability and the but-for test. It established as well the element of causation. However, for Dr. Newton, because of the element of him being privy to the information of the limiting leg mobility, it held him not liable, as he did not know. He did his job not negligently and did it well. Now, thank you. I will pass it on to my colleague to explain the names.
Moving on, let's see if there be any differences if we pursue this case under the Malaysian law. The first element, the Malaysian law follows closely on what was established in the English law. It was mentioned by the partner that in medical negligence, the duty of care has automatically been established. While in this case, Romeo wanted to take action against the doctor who performed the surgery towards him, and it comes under medical negligence, so the duty of care has been established. For the second element, improving whether there is breach of duty of care, unlike under negligent cases, the Malaysian court used the Bolam test and also the judgment from Rogers vs. Whittaker to prove medical negligence. Instead of using the Montgomery test, the Malaysian courts followed the verdict from Rogers vs. Whittaker for cases related to consent, as they believed that the Bolam test is not suitable for deciding the case of consent. In the case of Rogers vs. Whittaker, the claimant almost went blind on her right eye and was suggested to undergo a surgery. She ended up almost total blindness, and the doctor did not mention the risk to her. The Australian justice said specifically in the field of non-disclosure of risk and the provision of advice and information that even though the evidence given by medical practitioner is beneficial, but it's the duty to court to decide what is the appropriate standard of care after giving weight to the paramount consideration that a person is entitled to make his own decision about his life. If the claimant was told about the risk, she wouldn't agree to undergo the surgery. The law should also establish that a doctor has a duty to warn of the material risk inherent in the proposed treatment. Will a reasonable person in the patient position will still continue with the treatment if they know the risk? In Malaysia, the case of Fiona is where the courts chose not to follow the Bolam test. The claimant here became paralyzed after the surgery, and she was not told about the risk. The federal court here held in determining standard duty of care of medical practitioners in relation to disclosure of information and risk is not in the Bolam test. Dr. Richard is the one who suggested Domio to undergo surgical thrombectomy to remove the blood clot in his brain, but he did not warn Domio the risk of the surgery. If Domio knew the risk beforehand, he wouldn't agree to undergo the surgery. Even though the Bolam test was not relevant in the matter of consent, it was still used for the aspect of diagnosis, advice, and treatment. In the case of Zul Hasina binti Hassan Basri and Anno vs. Dr. Kopu Velmani, where the plaintiff suffered severe bleeding that required an emergency cesarean. Later on, her baby was born but there is ruptured blood vessel at placenta, and the doctors had to perform a hysterectomy. Here, the federal court decided that the Bolam test is suitable as it related to the issue of diagnosis, advice, and treatment. Dr. Richard did not wait for the CT scan result, which falls under diagnosis. If he waited for the CT scan result, Domio might not suffer the aftermath of the surgery. The third element and also the final element of this issue is causation. In order to prove this, the but-for test will be applied. The but-for test will first used in the case of Burnett vs. Chelsea and Kensington Hospital Management, where it proves that due to the defendant negligence, it caused the claimant damage. It was applied in Swamy vs. Matthews and Anwar, where the claimant claimed that he suffered paralysis due to defendant giving him an injection. If Dr. Richard did not perform the surgery towards Domio, he wouldn't suffer from pulmonary embolism. Looking at the possibility test to determine the remoteness of damage, which was proved in the case of Jumat bin Mahmud and Anwar. In this case, the plaintiff lost his eyes as he was pricked by a pencil and claimed that the defendant was responsible to prevent the accident from happening. Here, the court has to consider if the damage is possible or not. Here, the damage that was sustained by Domio is foreseeable, as it was concluded that there is 5% of risk that he will suffer pulmonary embolism. To wrap up, Dr. Richard has satisfied all the elements of negligence. The first element was proven as there is a relationship between them, a doctor-patient relationship. The second element was proven by applying all the tests that were mentioned, which is the Boland test and the judgment made by courts in Rogers vs. Whittaker. Lastly, the possibility test, which determines Dr. Richard's action that caused Domio to suffer the aftermath of this stroke. It can be concluded that Domio could take action towards Dr. Richard. Finally, our presentation has come to the end. On behalf of my partner and myself, I would like to say thank you to Ms. Marnie for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation possible. This is our first experience to have a presentation online.